All right, ladies and gentlemen, I will have to get back to one of my famous charts that I made a few months ago. And I talked about this many times. And we are exactly where we are, which is the return to normal market. I've talked about this, and it feels exactly like it today. Everything is back to normal, sunshine, beautiful, hot summer day today. However, how do we feel about the market? If you speak to most people, they say it has flattened out, everything is back to normal, and we'll be back. You know, the action is right around the corner. The boom in June of 2025, then the boom in July of 2025. I'm sure we will have another boom in August of 2025, and it will continue until people actually realize that there's really not much fumes left. I mean, like people are making it happen respectfully, right? And which is fine. Like that's what you're supposed to do. But I see all these sectors now, obviously with the tariffs and everything that has been going on, people are realizing and they're starting to breathe very heavy. So I have a couple of points that I would like to touch on, but looking on this graph, this famous graph, right? You know, the return to normal, if it doesn't happen, which I don't think it will happen, I do not believe that we will see the prices off the cliff overnight, which it might happen. You just don't know nowadays. But in 2008, it felt like that, right? It did feel like that in the United States, right? And we keep blaming them. They're like, oh, listen, they didn't know what they were doing. That's why they were where they were, or it happened to them, whatever happened to them. And I asked the same question. So what do we know that they do not know, right? Very simple question in 2025. Well, like, I mean, what do they know? And they said, like, look, at the time of 2007 and 2008, you know, financial crisis, they did not know how to calculate, and they were giving out these mortgages and these credits to the people carelessly. I said, really? Is that really so? So what happened to us in Canada here? We did the exact same thing. You know, people were getting mortgages and they were getting these credits like that overnight. You were approved. As long as you had a pulse, you were approved, right? And even the appraisals would, like, you know, the banks were very light on the appraisal. So I believe after the stage, and if you're looking at the graph, we're coming to the fear mode. And that particular segment, some of the people are already there. Don't kid yourself. They're already there. Because if they're not making the next mortgage payment, they know something is up. They can pray, they can want, they can wish. But however, if they don't have the funds to fulfill, all of a sudden, it's fear, right? So in the fear, you know, you get that part where some people are doing just fine, and some people are, you know, they feel the bank account being lighter, and they have the fear. So then you have the other part of people that they say, well, don't worry about it. You know, things will level off, as they like to say. We're gonna hit the, you know, bottom. This is the bottom. It'll level off. Just hang in there. Another 3 months, another 6 months. You know, they even give them the timeline, right? Like, hang in there another year and everything will be fine, without any guarantees, obviously. So that fear, some people, they stick through it. They say, okay, I'll try to manage fighting my fears, right? I'll try to do that, right? And then once they do that, they'll get into the stuck mode. If they're not already in the stuck mode, they will be in the stuck mode. And we have seen that in the pre-construction market, condominium market. We have seen people buying all these cottages. We've seen people buying all these cars that they don't need, or yachts, like the luxurious segment, you know, buying watches that they cannot afford. You know, like people tell them you have to wait for a year or two to get a watch. Are you kidding me right now? Right? But those were the times. So people were investing in that fear mode. If I do not buy it now, I will never, ever in my entire life will be able to buy it. right? Because it was the FOMO driven and all of that stuff. So looking at that, if they pass that fearful stage, they'll get into the stuck mode. So being in the stuck mode, it is hard to understand people being in the stuck mode. I have to be honest, right? And hitting the rock bottom, right? It's the same as hitting the highest peak of the mountain, being high on the top, right? It's the same pain, let's call it pain, it's just upside down, right? So people at the bottom, they're obviously worried, well, you know what, like I don't have those funds for that payment. I don't have that payment for my sons or daughters or girlfriends or boyfriends, student plan or fulfillment, or I don't have XYZ. I cannot bring food to the table. Believe me, there are people that are struggling even with food, even though everything looks so phenomenal and everything looks so bright and tight, right? But a lot of people are suffering, and there's a high percentage of that, right? It's just they're stuck in their head. So that's being at the bottom. But then I speak to the people at the top, right? Like at that peak of that mountain, that highest peak of that hill, right? And I tell them, I'm like, what's your problem? I mean, like, come on, man, like you're swimming in millions and all of this stuff. And they tell me, look, it's the same thing. I'm fearful because if I don't produce an amount, right, whether it's annual amount, whether it's a monthly amount, I cannot sustain myself and I will fall off this cliff. And that's the truth. And I said, okay, fine. So give me an example, right? And they said, like, look, first of all, having all this money is fine, but I have to do something with the money. Like, I cannot just let it sit there, right? And obviously they're in some corporations and yada, 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 and tax brackets and savings and all of that stuff. I said, okay, fine, but what's the plan? Like, they're like, look, like I have all these millions, I have to sink them somewhere. So what's the solution? Is it crypto? Is it real estate? Is it cash? Is it putting them in businesses? Is it acquiring more of what people are trying to get rid of? X, Y, and Z, anything, whatever, right? So it is difficult to invest $100 million today. Even though to us, like to me personally, it's like, come on, man. Like it's a joke. If you have it, like, no. It's like if you really are looking at it as a business perspective, the more you have, the harder it is to invest. Now, investing is one part, but what's the return on an investment? That's the catch, right? Because they have to fulfill other obligations. And it's easy for us to say, well, look, if you have 100 person staff, fire half. Well, listen, if you're trying to grow and if you're trying to make these numbers happen, it doesn't work that easy. It's not just walk to the park. So there's like how are you gonna find these qualified staff again? It takes time. So they're in the same boat. They're fearful, they're stuck, they have to keep everything, they have to project everything, they have to risk everything, and then finally they get into the surrender mode, right? People on top and on bottom, right, in the hole, they will eventually, after the stuck mode, get to the surrender mode. And we have seen it happen, unfortunately, in all these crises along the way, historically, where people will give up. A tower, like 60-story hotel in Las Vegas, boom, goes bankrupt, right? Like I've talked about over $1 billion bankruptcy in Toronto. Like I think it was a year ago or 2 years ago and stuff like that, right? Like billions of dollars. They're not even millions of dollars, right? So I believe when they get to that, surrender mode, just get me out, and in both segments, people at the bottom or people at the top is I think the satisfaction of everything that they have done, right, led them to either side, whether it's the bottom or whether it's the top. But it was always centered to fulfill who they are. It's who am I? What is this, right? Am I living somebody else's fake dream, right? Like I know kids or students that they're trying to fulfill being a doctor. And I asked them, well, do you even want to be a doctor? No, but I like to pay. I'm like, hold on a second. Like, you're going to school, you're going to shove all of that information in your head. I'm going to probably get to your desk in 20 years, and who cares? I mean, like, it's just like another day of work. It doesn't matter, right? Like, I maybe gave a bad example, but it is what it is, right? Like, I mean, you know, and then like people selling cars, like I've talked to these people, salespeople, and I asked them, well, do you really want to be stuck in this dealership selling cars? And they say, no, I hate it, but the money is good, or it was good. I don't know now, but it was good. I said, well, how can you provide the service every day to yourself, not to the client? Maybe you're good, maybe you can convert, maybe you can do something to make that sale happen, make your $500, $15,000, whatever the amount is. But how can you look at yourself in the mirror and say, well, that's it, I made it? And then these people, once they get to that cliff, they don't find themselves. And it's all about that. I think it's all about, yes, we need to work. Yes, we need to provide. Yes, we need to sell or buy. And you've been sold on an idea every single day, no matter what you do. That's just life. You're selling your kids on ideas. Kids are selling you on the same ideas, right? And we're just selling each other. But do you really enjoy what you do, right? And holding on to something that's not going to service you, I find that it's being extremely difficult, right? Like, and in some of my other videos, I had a conversation between a dad and a son, right? Like son being 27 years old, and it's a paradox, right? The father wants the property values to go up because he needs to retire, he needs to fund his lifestyle, but also he wants his son to buy cheap real estate. I said, well, how are we going to do that? How are we going to make that happen if you're not willing to give up on the peak, on the hill, and then your son is at the bottom of the barrel, right? And then I ask him, well, okay, hold on a second. Is it generational wealth driven? Like, are you gonna give your son the money? And he said, well, maybe. I said, what do you mean? Like, you know, the son is sitting there. It's like, what do you mean? What do you mean maybe? And he said, well, I need it. I need to retire. I need that money. My house is worth $1.8 million in his head anyways. It's not worth that much, but in his head, it's worth 1.8. It's probably 1.5. But in his head, it's 1.8. I said, well, okay, so let's say it is. It is 2.4, whatever, right? So are you, well, I would, but I can't because I need to retire. I need to fulfill all of my debt obligations that I have, that I went through in my life. And then I need to square it off with everybody, including myself. And then finally I can maybe retire. And the question is, can I even retire in Canada, number one? And number two, do I want to retire in Canada? Because most people say, well, it is too expensive. Like they're looking, you know, other venues. Like, you know, we had for decades and decades, people were retiring in Florida, right? Snowbirds, they call them snowbirds, whatever. But even they say, even Florida is getting out of hand and it's shaky and it's unstable. So people are trying to find other parts of the world and the globe. Maybe they have a country on a bench. You know, maybe they're from Greece and they'll go back to Greece. Maybe they're Italian. So they have a, you know, country sitting like a plan B country on a bench. But some Canadians don't. So how do we figure that out? So I really and truly hope that you got some value out of this video. Please share it to somebody that you think that would enjoy and get some information valuable information out of this video, just share it to somebody. Please like, share, and subscribe once again, and I'll see you in the next one.